Chapter 1. Birchfields, the Devlins' country home, outside London, England. The dining room at Birchfields was perhaps Garnet's favorite in all the large Tudor mansion. On this mild summer evening, the French windows stood open, admitting a soft breeze, fragrant with flowers from the garden. The long table set with the new china service gleamed in the glow of tall, lighted tapers in twisted silver candelabra, and the centerpiece of white tulips and blue delphinium pleased her especially. The menu, too, was superb. The jellied soup, the fresh sole and cream sauce, the petit pois, and parsleyed potatoes. Tomorrow she must be sure to compliment the cook. Her seating plan had been inspired, Garnet observed. Placing the young people on both sides of the table opposite each other and interspersing them with the rather staid older couples, the Edgertons, Jeremy's publisher and his wife, and the vicar and Mrs. Bentley Todd, had kept things lively. Even the vicar was laughing heartily at some amusing comment of Tom's. "Yes, the entire weekend is going very well," she thought with satisfaction. Garnet's gaze roamed the length of the table, then lingered a moment longer on her daughter. Faith seemed to be enjoying herself tonight. She often didn't. Why the girl did not seem to derive much pleasure from social occasions, Garnet could not for the life of her understand. Her own life as a belle had been such fun, that is, until that dreadful war had come along, and the love of her life, Malcolm Montrose, had brought home his Yankee bride. A burst of laughter brought Garnet back to the present, annoyed that she had not caught the remark that had prompted it. Although she tried to keep her mind on the flow of conversation during the dessert of fruit sorbet, Garnet subconsciously kept track of Neil Blanding. In her opinion, with his blonde Viking good looks and courtly manners, his pleasant personality and keen intelligence, Neil would be an ideal husband for Faith. Not only that, his background and breeding were impeccable. Bearing one of the oldest names in the county, his family was among the wealthiest landowners. Furthermore, Neil was in line for a title through his father's bachelor brother, Lord Blanding. Yes, in every way, Neil was Faith's best possibility for a prestigious marriage. If the foolish girl would only realize it. At the moment, however, Neil was involved in an animated conversation with pretty Lady Alison Ashford, who would be presented at court with Faith later this summer. Garnet felt a pinch of irritation and frowned. Why wasn't Faith paying attention? Then, remembering that ladies over 40 must take care not to cause any more lines than possible, Garnet quickly smoothed her brow. It was Alison's aunt, Lydia Ainsley, who was sponsoring Faith's presentation at court. In fact, it was through Lydia's friendship with Blythe Montrose, now Garnet's sister-in-law, that this honor was being bestowed on Faith. Bother! Why did she have to think about Blythe now? Garnet knew that her old resentment of Blythe Montrose Cameron should have long since disappeared, especially since her marriage to Garnet's brother had given Rod at last this long-awaited happiness. But deep down, she had to admit that it still rankled. After all, if Malcolm Montrose, Garnet's first love, had not met and married Blythe in California, he might have come home to her. Determinedly, she directed her gaze to her husband, Jeremy Devlin. Kind, patient, considerate. Hadn't he rescued her from a life of poverty and deprivation after the war, and given her, instead, everything she had lost and more? When she realized he was looking at her with a kind of questioning in his gray eyes, she favored him with one of her most dazzling smiles. Jeremy felt a familiar sensation in his heart as he returned his wife's smile. He had never ceased to be amazed at his own good fortune in persuading this woman to marry him. He often saw that confirmed in the admiring looks of other men as they followed her slim figure with their eyes, listened to her laugh, were captivated by her charm. Garnet might not be considered beautiful, he knew, but she had something far more valuable than mere beauty. She has a look that is distinctly her own, he mused. Her graceful carriage and the clothes she could now afford gave her a stunning appearance, and if there were a single gray hair in her reddish blonde hair, it had been dispensed with or skillfully disguised. The final effect was one in which Jeremy had always taken great pride. Yes, he was a lucky man indeed. Still, he knew his wife could be manipulative, trying to maneuver people and events her way. Right now, noticing the tiny pucker on Garnet's forehead, he wondered just what she might be up to, and following her glance, saw that their daughter was listening with rapt attention to whatever Jeff Montrose was saying, while Neil Blanding and the young Ashford girl were chatting. So that was it. Garnet was concerned about Faith's prospects, and Lady Allison posed a threat. He hoped Garnet wouldn't interfere. More than anything in the world, Jeremy wanted his daughter's happiness, and whichever young man would make her happy. Neil Blanding, having completed the inconsequential exchange with Allison, found his gaze traveling automatically to Faith Devlin. How lovely she looked in the candlelight. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkling, her lips curved in an enchanting smile. Her whole face was alive and radiant. Maybe it had something to do with Jeff Montrose, who had monopolized her the whole evening, he thought with a flicker of irritation. Neil felt a pang that was part jealousy, part discouragement. He had known since it had been drummed into him as a teenager that it was his duty as the only son of his family to marry and continue the distinguished line, to ensure the title. He had assumed that his bride would come from the dozen or so young women in the small circle of titled families in his class. But instead of one of the young ladies his mother, Lady Ellen, might have picked out for him, Neil had met Faith Devlin. She was not only of American parentage, but possessed all the characteristics and personality traits his mother deplored. She was outspoken, opinionated, independent, and Neil was completely fascinated with her. Of all the young women he knew, Faith was the only one he wanted. Although she had told him over and over it was hopeless, Neil had a stubborn streak as well, and he continued to hope that one day she might change her mind. Faith, suddenly conscious of Neil's adoring eyes upon her, felt a rush of sympathy. Dear Neil. She wished she could find someone right for him, someone as accomplished and affectionate as he deserved. Maybe then he would stop clinging to the possibility that she might come to care for him. Of course, she did care for him, but he wanted more. He wanted the kind of love she could give only Jeff. Faith experienced a twinge in her own heart. Was she, too, holding on to an impossible dream? Feeling Faith's eyes on him, Jeff realized that there had not yet been a chance for them to talk, no opportunity to tell her about his plan. Ever since his arrival at Birchfields, there had been only oppressive people and fast-paced activity. He was bursting to tell someone, especially Faith. He could always count on her to back up his belief in himself and his dreams. What an interesting face she has, he thought, watching her in animated conversation with her guests. The high cheekbones, the dark wings of brows, the hair swept simply back from her forehead, her clear hazel eyes. Is it her eyes that make her so, well, yes, so beautiful? Someday he must paint Faith, Jeff decided. Someday when he really knew how to do her justice. Tomorrow he'd have to find a way to get her off somewhere alone. Then he'd share everything with her. "I know what you mean," Faith was saying, nodding her head. "Let me share a family joke." She threw Garnet a mischievous look. "I once overheard this exchange between my mother and one of the foreign guests Papa had brought down for the weekend. The gentleman said politely to Mama, 'Mrs. Devlin, I understand you are an American,' to which Mama replied—" Here, Faith's eyes danced wickedly as she paused to deliver the coup de grace. With another teasing look at her mother, Faith, in an exact imitation of Garnet's soft Southern accent, finished, "Why, no, sir. I am a Virginian." There was a peal of delighted laughter. Even Garnet joined in good-naturedly. This story, which had been told on her dozens of times, always provoked great hilarity. As long as her guests were entertained, it didn't disturb her one whit to be the butt of a joke told in good taste. "Virginians are a rare breed," Jeff murmured in acknowledgement. "With apologies to you, of course, Aunt Garnet." Faith giggled. "Virginians worship their ancestors, just as the Chinese do." "No more than the English, I'm afraid. Right, Allison?" suggested Neil with a glance at Lady Allison. "What a nice sense of humor Neil has," Garnet thought approvingly. "A rare trait for an Englishman." She glanced over at her daughter, hoping that Faith appreciated that aspect of his personality, too. It was then that Garnet saw Faith and Jeff exchanging a look, their eyes locking for a long moment. Garnet felt a sharp little dart of alarm. Even after Jeff had turned away, she could see the expression on Faith's face. It was one Garnet recognized only too well. "It can't be." It must have been the gleam of candlelight, she told herself, trying her best to dismiss the thought. "It's only a trick of the light." But in her heart, she knew better.